America's educational system is falling behind. While the rest of the developed world raises the bar and invests heavily in their children's future, the United States has settled for stagnation and mediocrity. Attempts to solve this great problem, from President Bush's No Child Left Behind to President Obama's Race to the Top, have all failed. But why? Past attempts at education reform have failed for primarily three reasons. Number one, standardized testing. Number two, the income achievement gap. And number three, the age achievement gap. What do these problems mean for American education? This video will explain how the arbitrary ways in which we evaluate and structure our schools are hampering our educational system, and how poverty is the true underlying cause of our problems in education. First of all, let's talk about standardized testing. In recent years, there has been far too much emphasis put upon high-stakes standardized tests. Test scores are now the primary method of evaluating students, teachers, and schools. If a teacher's students do poorly on these tests, that teacher will likely be fired in many states. If an entire school gets poor test scores, that school, rather than getting the aid and assistance it needs, is labeled as a failed school. It will lose funding, which will lead to budget cuts. These budget cuts will lead to layoffs and the cutting of classes, especially in the fine and industrial arts. This will in turn lead to even poorer test scores, and the school will eventually be closed, its students sent to other nearby schools. Class sizes will subsequently increase at these other schools, and students from the old school, whose lives have been disrupted, will continue to score poorly on standardized tests.
Under No Child Left Behind, all of the assessments are based on one test on one day of the year. You know, there's nobody in business or athletics that is measured on a single day on a single measure. It takes multiple measures to know whether or not a student is learning and whether or not the system is delivering for those kids.
What's interesting is that most of the best educated countries put little emphasis on standardized tests, and actually recognize that they are more of a hindrance than a help. For instance, Finland consistently ranks #1 in the world in primary and secondary education. But Finnish students take no standardized tests in primary or secondary school. In fact, in Finland, students don't take a single standardized exam until they apply for college. The fervor for increased standardized testing essentially exists in the US alone. Europe and East Asia long ago recognized the true effect of such high-stakes tests. They force teachers to teach to the test, rather than giving students a deep and ambiguous understanding of what they are learning. Today, the average American high school student will spend 110 hours preparing for and taking standardized tests. That's about 15 school days, or 3 full school weeks. Michigan State Representative John Keevala, a member of the Michigan House Democrats School Reform Task Force, had this to say about standardized testing in schools.
I'm not a big fan of all the tests that you guys take. You know, we end up teaching kids to take tests. Why all the tests? What are we really teaching for? So yeah, I'm not a fan. And I think it does sometimes peg people and set them down a path maybe that isn't properly suited for them.
Educators are also held hostage by standardized tests when designing school curriculum. As such tests generally focus heavily on math and science, there is often an overemphasis on these subjects and on the students who want to pursue careers in them. This is often at the expense of students who wish to pursue different goals. There are only so many teachers and dollars to go around, so humanities education and vocational training are often underemphasized. Not everybody is going to be an engineer or a scientist. The real world is rarely black and white, but on standardized tests there is only one correct bubble to fill in. The second, and perhaps most pressing issue facing American education today is the income achievement gap. Studies have shown that on average, wealthier students consistently get better grades and better test scores than students from lower income families. For instance, look at the Baltimore elementary school students' scores on the California Achievement Test, or CAT, when the results are divided by economic class. As early as first grade, upper class students have a 32-point edge over their lower class peers, but by 5th grade, that disparity has more than doubled to 73 points. Not only are poor students at a severe disadvantage when it comes to primary and secondary school, they are also at a severe disadvantage when it comes to getting a college education. College tuition rates now increase by 8% on average every year, more than double the average national rate of inflation. At the same time, income disparity has increased. The wealthiest 1% of American earners saw their income rise 20% in 2012, whereas the remaining 99% saw average raises of less than 1%. This essentially means that it's easier than ever for the wealthy to pay for college, and harder than ever for the poor to do the same. Finally, one of the most fundamental and most overlooked problems with our schools is the age achievement gap. Numerous studies have shown that the oldest students in a grade or class generally perform better than the youngest students. In fact, many parents know this. They choose to send their child into kindergarten a year later, when they will be older and more mature than most of their classmates. But regardless of when parents put their children into school, the conventional wisdom is that whatever disadvantages younger children have at a young age will eventually go away. The fact is that they don't. Older students don't just outperform their younger peers in elementary school, they continue to do so throughout middle school, high school, and even college. The youngest students in schools today will miss out on academic opportunities, awards, and scholarships. Due to this educational disadvantage, they will miss out on jobs, raises, and countless other opportunities in the future. They will be negatively affected for the rest of their lives by a choice their parents made for them when they were 5 years old. Is this the new status quo? Are we willing to allow our children's future to be sacrificed on the altar of petty politics and private interests? As American students, we certainly hope not. A great education is essential to the success of individuals and America as a whole. That is why we believe that Congress should make education reform their top priority in 2014.